Do you all remember this guy? That's Ryan Walters. He's the superintendent of public instruction in Oklahoma. He is just a Trump toady, will do anything possible to make Trump think he's awesome. Well, he's getting sued, and it's for the best reason because he absolutely deserves this. And I need to explain to you what he did that made people so angry and why they're suing him now. So basically, what happened with Ryan Walters is that sometime last year, he announced that they were going to revise the social studies standards in the entire state. And he wanted to make it, he announced this up front. He said he wanted to make it super, super Jesus y. All right. Because his whole goal is to brainwash children. He doesn't hide this. And this is what he said at the time in the press release. Check this out. December 18th is the date here. The new standards are among the strongest in the country. Pro-America, pro-American exceptionalism, because if there's, I hate that phrase because every other country in the world is like, what the fuck is wrong with America right now? And I don't have a good answer for you, but we are not exceptional. And strengthen civics and constitutional studies, blah, blah, blah. They include Superintendent Walters' Bible curriculum recommendations and mention the Bible and its historical impact over 40 times. And then he even quotes himself in his press release. Oklahoma is putting the Bible and the historical impact of Christianity back in school. Like, all right, you're kind of saying this stuff out loud. You're not supposed to do that. So what did he actually do? What's supposed to happen is he's supposed to release the proposed standards to the public, and then the public gets a certain amount of days to weigh in on it, to complain about it, to make suggestions. There's a committee that revises all of this, and then the Board of Education for the state of Oklahoma has to approve it in a vote. That's the game plan. So when Ryan Walters released the standards, people started noticing there's a lot of crazy stuff in here that is not good for children. So here's an example. This is what would you teach grade 1? Well, for example, for grade 1, one of the things that Ryan Walters says they got to know is they got to explain the purpose and meaning of the Pledge of Allegiance and the significance of the phrase under God. I don't think he's expecting teachers to say, yeah, it was shoved in the pledge in 1954. They took that phrase, one nation, indivisible, and then divided us with religion. I don't think he's expecting anyone to say that. But you have to tell people why we say under God in the pledge. What else is in here? First graders would also have to check this out. They have to explain the meaning of our motto, in God we trust, including the importance of religion to American people, which is weird because Americans, by and large, have been trending away from religion over the past 20, 30 years. So I don't know what that's all about. What about second graders? Check this out. Second graders have to identify stories from Christianity that influenced American colonists, founders, and culture, including the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth, which is hilarious because you know who doesn't give a shit about Jesus? Every elected Republican right now. Oh, you want me to help the poor? No, I'm going to take away their health coverage. But look at what the examples he gives. The Sermon on the Mount. That's the speech where Jesus says, help the least of these. Give to the poor, the hungry. And that's the one thing Republicans are not doing. And then it says the golden rule as if that's a Jesus original. Like, no, treat others the way you want to be treated. That was around long before, the Jesus stuff happened. But that's what they wanted to teach second graders. It's a lot of this is very David Barton-esque. He's the pseudo historian that basically his entire career is going from church to church, from city council meeting to state legislatures, everywhere, telling them that the Bible is part of American history. And he just makes shit up because he's a conservative Christian. You think he cares about lying? He does not. So he just lies to everyone about it. And then that becomes the gospel for a bunch of these conservatives. In 8th grade, this one's interesting. In 8th grade, kids have to learn, I don't know if you could see this one, I'll remove myself, evaluate the role of Judeo-Christian ideals in supporting colonial demands for independence, as exemplified by the Bible being a frequently cited authority by America's founders. The Bible's not a frequently cited authority. I know I've said this before. I'm not the first to say it. The Bible, I'm sorry, God, religion appears twice in the US Constitution, and both times it's preceded by the word no. Like they are not citing the Bible in any of our founding documents. For high school students, the indoctrination gets even worse. This is something they want high schoolers to do. Describe how the Constitution of the United States was influenced by religion, morality, and the Bible as a frequently cited authority. Again, it was not. Um, this one is also there. This is world history, and you're supposed to treat the Bible as like historical text. Look at this. This is in world history. Describe the central features of Christianity in ancient Rome, like monotheism. All right, fine. Using use of the Old and New Testaments, the influence of St. Paul, and the meanings and effects of Jesus of Nazareth's words as recorded by Matthew, as if what's written in the Bible, in the Gospels, is like a primary document that we can all just rely on. Like, no, that's not how any of this works. There's one other interesting thing to show you here. There was an elective class on 20th century totalitarianism, and it included this bit. Describe the Christian idea of the equality of souls, that we're all equal, the Christian ideal of charity, because no one other than Christians can be charitable, and the renunciation of worldly wealth, which, I don't know, have these people ever heard of Trump? So this is the sort of shit that Ryan Walters was trying to get social studies classes from kindergarten through high school to teach kids. It was completely messed up. So who wrote these standards? Because he didn't just sit in a room and do this himself. There was a 10-member committee that put together these social studies standards, and they included a co-founder of PragerU, the right-wing conspiracy YouTube channel, a representative from the Conservative American Enterprise Institute, the president of the Heritage Foundation, which is the group behind Project 2025. Only 3 of the people on the committee ever lived in Oklahoma, and no one on that committee was a public school teacher or an administrator or anything like that. So here's where it got worse. Earlier this year, in February, the Board of Education, now that the public got to weigh in and complain about it, and the executive committee is like, oh, we heard your complaints and we do not care about any of it. Well, the State Board of Education still had to vote on it. And by this time, Ryan Walters had gotten under the ire of the governor, Kevin Stitt. They're both Republicans. They're both like MAGA Republicans, but these guys hate each other. And Kevin Stitt replaced like half the Board of Education, thinking maybe they will stop Ryan Walters in a way. So whether or not they're going to vote for the social studies curriculum was like the first big test of that. And when they got to this meeting in February, what happened? Well, here's what happened. This is from Judd Legum of Popular Information. Walters' new social studies standards were approved, but many members have since said that Walters used deceptive tactics to pass new last-minute changes. He did not send the new standards. Oh, by the way, Ryan Walters decided all the things I just showed you, that was version 1.0. He secretly wrote up version 2.0, didn't tell anybody he changed it, and then sent that to the State Board of Education. And he sent it to them at 4 p.m. the day before the board's 9:30 a.m. meeting. So they didn't have time to look at his revisions. And some of the members said later they didn't even realize that the new standards were different than the earlier version they had previously reviewed. So Ryan Walters urged this Board of Education. He's like, you guys got to pass this now. The legislature needs a chance to approve it, so you got to do it now. You don't have time to read it. Very similar to the way Republicans just passed this anti-Medicaid bill today. Don't read it. Just take our word for it. It's fine. And so the Board of Education said, okay, I guess we'll do that because they're idiots. And they did it. And they passed it. And it was only after they passed it that people realized, wait a minute, the new standards are somehow even worse than the older ones. What do I mean by that? Well, here's an example of what they did. This is the old version, which again, it wasn't great, but this is the old version of the social studies standards. What do you do if you're trying to ask kids in 9th grade to describe the first Trump administration, right? Because they're young. What do you teach them about Trump 2016 to 2020, you know? And this is what they used to say. Identify major policy issues, tax cuts, immigration, border security, and the expanding influence of social media. That's fair. Describe changes in foreign policy. Explain the responses to an impact of the death of George Floyd, including the Black Lives Matter movement. Interesting. Evaluate federal and private response to the COVID epidemic and the impact to global health. Examine issues related to the election of 2020 and its outcome, which is a way of saying discuss January 6th. And you know what? That is fair. All of that stuff, if I had to try to explain Trump 1.0 to a bunch of kids who were babies, you know, to learn about it, this is a good overview of the big stuff. What did Ryan Walters do to this section in version 2.0? Here's that same section under 2.0. And the things I want to draw your attention to, look at C. Identify the source of the COVID-19 pandemic from a Chinese lab. Like, what? That's not established fact. He's just like, yeah, that's how it happened. Notice that anything about Trump policy matters. Foreign policy, that stuff is basically gone. Look at D. This is the one that got a lot of headlines. Identify discrepancies in 2020 election results. There were no discrepancies that actually made any sort of difference. This is like the Dinesh D'Souza propaganda movie that Ryan Walters is like, yeah, discuss how all that stuff happened during 2020 because there's no way Biden legitimately won. It's just election denial and conspiracy theories. This is what Walters is doing. It's completely messed up. I'll play this game again. Version 1.0, they said, what do you teach kids about the Biden presidency? And again, this is fair general stuff. Describe bipartisan efforts to address infrastructure. Describe U.S.-Mexico border crisis. Gaza-Israel conflict. Withdrawal from Afghanistan. Yes, fine. Discuss that stuff. What does Ryan Walters in version 2.0 want them to learn instead? He basically removed anything good that Biden was known for doing and focuses only on the bad stuff. Notice he doesn't even say Gaza in this version. It just says Hamas. Like, that's Ryan Walters for you. Remember that one passage, that totalitarian class where they said, talk about the renunciation of world wealth and the Christian ideal of charity? He just nixed that entire section altogether. So anyway, besides just changing all of this, another problem here is how are you going to get textbooks if you're offering this conservative, conspiracy-driven idea of U.S. history? And this is something that even lawmakers pointed out. This is from a former Oklahoma City Public Schools board member. He said, standards that deviate too far from established facts can make it hard for textbook companies to write textbooks for the state. When you start deviating from the norm and the truth and start coming up with your own truths and throwing the Bible and election denying and all that, there's going to come a point where Oklahoma won't have a textbook publisher willing to align to our standards and sell a book. Because basically you would have to rewrite a textbook. And for what? For a handful of kids in Oklahoma? And then your reputation sucks because you're the company that put out conspiracy theories. So I don't want to do business with you if I live in a blue state. So it's just a horrible idea for that reason. So anyway, all of this stuff has already happened. I've made videos about it. The Oklahoma legislature had a chance to strike down these new standards, but the Republicans there said, no, we're not going to do anything to stop it. Surprise. So they let the standards go through. And so here's where we're at right now. The Ryan Walters conspiracy-driven version 2.0 social studies standards are now the law in Oklahoma. And they go into effect starting in August of this year when school is back in session. That's where we're at right now. And that is why a group of people have decided to sue Ryan Walters. And check this out. This is the lawsuit that was just filed. And this is filed in the state of Oklahoma. It's not a federal case here. And there's a bunch of plaintiffs, starting with Reverend Dr. Mitch Randall. And they're suing Ryan Walters. They're suing Oklahoma State Department of Education, the Board of Education. and all of these people that played a role in passing these standards. So they're going after everybody. And what does this lawsuit say? In general, and by the way, I should say, those plaintiffs are represented by Americans United for Separation of Church and State and a group called the Oklahoma Appleseed Center for Law and Justice. And here's what they say. They say they oppose their tax dollars being spent on education standards that promote religion and inaccuracies. And specifically, they point out that Ryan Walters and the Board of Education broke so many laws in implementing this set of standards. Specifically, version 2.0 was never released to the public so that they could scrutinize it before the Board of Education voted on it. That violates the state's Open Meeting Act. When the Board of Education voted on this set of standards without knowing what was in them, the board violated a law requiring it to have authority over academic standards. They didn't even know what they were voting for. By forcing teachers to spread lies, that violates a law requiring information taught to kids to be accurate. I was shocked too, but that's an Oklahoma law. Spreading Christian propaganda to kids violates a law, they say, requiring age-appropriate standards. And by promoting Christianity above other faiths and no faith, the standards violate the Oklahoma Constitution. Because again, you cannot seriously argue that Christianity is part of U.S. history the way Ryan Walters is doing it, when by and large, he's just shoving Christianity and bragging about doing that. So the lawsuit says, hey, courts, you need to invalidate these standards before school starts up again. We need to go back to the old version until they can come up with a new legal version that passes. And then, pay our legal fees also. One of my favorite things about the entire lawsuit is that this lawsuit quotes Ryan Walters extensively. Check this out. In the lawsuit, number 57, I'm not going to read all of this, but I'll read the beginning. In an April 1st, 2025 social media post, Walters stated, Oklahoma is standing strong, ensuring students have access to the Bible as a vital cornerstone of our history and values. And he also depicted Oklahoma as participating in a movement to restore our nation's moral foundation, which maybe you think that sounds nice, but that has nothing to do with social studies. In an April 29th, 2025 social media post, Walters stated, as part of these standards, the Bible will now be recognized as a foundational text, helping students understand its undeniable influence on our nation's history and values. And this goes on for a while. Like, look at this. He did an interview with the right-wing One American News, and they asked him, are you bringing the word? Are you bringing God? Are you bringing Jesus back to the classroom in Oklahoma? And Walters responded, we are. This goes on for a while. They just use the dude's words against him over and over because he has spent the past several months doing victory laps on the right-wing media circuit, telling everybody, look what I did. I got the Bible back in school, y'all. Give me credit for that. And so now they're using that information. They also quote him as spreading the election denial. So all this stuff is not based on history or facts. It's based on his own broken, smooth-ass brain. They also point out in this lawsuit that many historians do not treat the Bible as accurate history. They say the Bible contains numerous inconsistencies, that the accounts of certain characters in the Bible were written long after the apparent settings they describe, and scholars generally treat certain biblical accounts as literary works that were written to serve ideological and theological goals, not to document literal history. And I want to repeat, who's the primary plaintiff in this case? It's a reverend. I appreciate what that reverend said, by the way. This is Americans United here, but check out what this reverend said on the top, like right up here. Lead plaintiff, the Reverend Dr. Mitch Randall, who's an ordained Baptist minister. Look at what he said. As a Christian, I object to Oklahoma's new social studies standards that require teachers to deceive students by presenting inaccurate information as fact. This is a Christian minister. To reduce the Bible to a history book rather than treating it as theological text does a disservice to public school students, their families, their teachers, and those who consider the Bible to be a book of faith. Look at this. As a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation, I'm especially bothered by my tax dollars supporting state mandated religious instruction. It's a painful reminder of the forced religious proselytization my family members experienced in Native American boarding schools in Oklahoma. I urge the court to protect religious freedom for all Oklahomans and prevent implementation of these new standards. Wow. So, right now, that's where we're at. We'll see if the courts do anything about this. I will remind you that Oklahoma, by one measure, is ranked 49th in the nation in education, and Ryan Walters is on a mission to make them number 50. He will not stop until they are the worst in the country. And one of the upsides to all of this, you may recall, this is not filed in federal court. This is filed in the state of Oklahoma. And the state Supreme Court has generally been okay when it comes to church state separation. Remember when Oklahoma recently tried to launch the first in the nation religious taxpayer funded charter school in the country? It was the Supreme Court of Oklahoma that shot that down. It was like a 6-1 decision. And by the way, the Attorney General of Oklahoma is the one that fought for them to strike it down. So that's another guy on the side of church state separation. So they're filing this in Oklahoma. Hopefully, if this gets up to the state Supreme Court, they will say, yeah, you can't do this, Ryan, and strike it down, and we'll go back to normal. Hopefully, we will see. It's a lot of talking. I'm sorry. All right, what questions we got here before I move on to the next story? Oh my God, they took one nation indivisible and divided us by religion is so fucking good. Is that a quote or a Hammond original? I have heard that saying many times before. If you look up church state separation podcast with my name on it, you will find a podcast I did many years ago where I documented over many hours the history of the Pledge of Allegiance. And that is one of the things that came up. Why did they insert under God in there? I'm going to do another story about the Pledge of Allegiance in just a second. I'm going to talk about it a little more. But yeah, there's a lot of reasons the Pledge of Allegiance is not a good thing to say, and why I would argue it's a prayer and not something that's patriotic at all. Walters wants to teach 6-year-olds about the Red Scare. Hey, it's never too early to break their brains, especially when they're moldable and not fully formed. Well, you teach about the Jefferson Bible. Thomas Paine didn't have much use for religion either. That's a great point to make. A lot of those founding fathers were deists, and they were non-religious. And even when they were Christian, like Jefferson, they were not the type of Christian that is conservative today. And the Jefferson Bible, Google that if you've never heard of it. That's a perfect example of Thomas Jefferson just saying, I don't believe in most of this shit. Those are some hard questions. What if the student writes that Trump led an insurrection? So this is where it gets interesting, because the standards I'm talking about here, this is the baseline. Teachers have to talk about this stuff, but school boards and teachers themselves have leeway in terms of what they teach and how they teach it. So if you have a good history teacher, they can actually give you the context you need, and they're not just following suit here. The problem, and this is not an Oklahoma thing, this is across the country, a lot of teachers don't actually know the subject areas they're teaching, not to the level that I wish they would. And that means the state standards are kind of their blueprint for what to teach. So if they don't tell you to talk about Black Lives Matter and George Floyd, those teachers may not do it at all. And that's part of the problem here. Ryan Walters is setting the basement of what should be taught, and a lot of teachers just follow that. And those are the students who need the most help. If you have a good teacher, they can negate all of the shit he's doing, but those are hard to find everywhere. You know what I mean? Can we fully appreciate the Bible as a brainwashing pamphlet for a failed system of government? I mean, the fact that Republicans want to replace the Constitution with the Bible, which very clearly is their goal because they do not care about the Constitution. And again, if they followed certain parts of the Bible, maybe we would be okay, but they're not. They're choosing the worst elements of it, cherry picking Bible verses to justify all the horrible stuff they're doing, and then telling everyone else we're immoral because we're not doing what they're doing. It is horrible.